Hi, I'm James, and today we've got something a little different in the video. I'm looking at a rather old copy of Strategy and Tactics magazine, which was published, let me get this one straight, in May-June 1976. So it's a bit late as a review, but I've only just picked this up. It came in the post a couple of days ago, and it raises a very interesting scenario for me. When we look at World War III breaking out, almost invariably we look at it as the Russians cross the border. Now, the Russian attitude was, could NATO have moved east? And this is a game that actually examines that. That's something different. So we'll have a quick skim through the magazine first. So what we have is the background talking about Warsaw Pact rebellions in the 1970s, a sidebar on how to street fight in Eastern Europe. It's not really particularly Eastern European based. It is interesting to look at it in comparison to what has happened post the Cold War in places like Chechnya and the Ukraine. It doesn't really put much of an emphasis on artillery, which is what the Russians have used massively in counterinsurgency. So it's an interesting little bit there. Talks about the logistics, and it very interesting for me, it picked up on the lack of Soviet trucks, which post this being written was gradually corrected. So it talks through, it gives an order of battle of all the divisions that you were likely to find in Europe at the time. Some of it does drop down to brigade level. Now it is quite interesting. I think it suffers from being a bit American centric, if I'm honest. The US list is quite good, and then you've got the National Guard units, which I think is quite useful for me, knowing the different ones there. Then you got the Army Reserve, the Marine Corps. But when it came to the British, it seems to have missed out the TA units. So it doesn't give a lot of detail there. Bit of a shame, but I can live with that. The West German units, reserve units, are just down as 5 brigades. It doesn't sort of go any further than that. But it is useful for some of the more minor countries as well, so that there's a lot in there. We're still carrying on with the article. A quick primer on US and Soviet small unit tactics. Quite interesting for me when I start looking at this. I mentally sort of tend to think mid to late 80s, but when I start looking at this, you see equipment like okay, M60 I would think about, but M114, yeah, who remembers that one? Red Eye, they're in there. The Russians are still using PT-76 as scout vehicles. So it's an interesting. This magazine's almost an artifact in itself. You've then got the rules for Revolt in the East, which are typical SPI. They are quite reasonable, 8 pages long, and we'll come back and talk about the game in a minute. You've then got their usual sort of briefing, a lot of detail on the Portuguese in Angola, and that's quite a useful little article if you don't know much about Angola. And then you go into, always quite amusing when you start looking at the sort of weapon technology and things like that, sort of various articles there. And then you go into the sort of their usual feedback and the statistical analysis of the games. So that's the actual magazine. Let's drop it back to what we're really interested in, which is the Revolt in the East. Now, what we have is a single map sheet. Nostalgia value for me. I do quite like the old SPI map sheets. You know, they have that. This is what I started gaming with, look for me. I started with the West Wall quad. So it's a 12-turn game, which gives you your reinforcements. Now, they are slightly vague. You go, what? So you, for example, 3 SV2 plus SV6 SYC SV7C. Huh? Well, what that stands for is 3 Soviet strength 2 units, Soviet strength 6 unit, and SYC refer to the individual scenarios, which we'll look at in a minute. So there's 4 different scenarios with the game. All the starter units are all marked on for which scenarios they're used in. It's a very simple set of maps. We've got the impassable terrain, which is basically bits of Austria and Switzerland. You've then got pretty much the whole of Eastern Europe, and it does go all the way down to Albania and Bulgaria in the south. Now, it's quite a nice little map. There's no road network or anything. It assumes that there's enough of a road network for it all to be road passable. You've also got rail networks, which, when the country is your starting country, so NATO countries have got their own rail network, and the Soviets have got their own rail network. Once you start moving into other countries, you lose that ability pretty much. There's a revolt table, which basically tells you which countries go into revolt based on the number of cities that are currently in revolt. Now, the interesting thing from the NATO player's perspective is you don't start with any troops at all until the first revolt kicks off, but you don't get access to NATO until it starts escalating. And the earliest NATO can get involved is if there are 2 cities currently in revolt. It does make it a very replayable game, I feel, because what is happening is you don't get the same game anytime. Each time you play it, each game is going to have different countries in revolt, and it does make a big difference. So yeah, that's a nice little touch, and that sort of obviously gradually escalates until if you've got 5 cities in revolt, there's a 1 in 3 chance that all of the Warsaw Pact revolts, and then 3 or more NATO becomes involved. So as it gets worse, it's getting really bad for the Russian player. They have to jump on it quickly, which, when you actually compare the historical precedents, you could look at Hungary in 1956. There was the classic one where you had that. You had the Czechoslovakia and the Prague summer of '68. That was another good example, and those are 2 historical scenarios that come with the game. Interestingly, the Hungarian one has a lot less emphasis on what's going on up here, because you don't have the West German army available yet. So you've got that, and then there is the scenario from 1985, General Sir John Hackett. That's built into the game as well, so it's an interesting sort of almost precursor of that, where Yugoslavia splits, and there's an interesting extra rule with that one, which I'll look at in a minute. And then you have the generic one where anything can revolt. So they are the different scenarios. Now, I looked at this, and my first thought was, oh wow, this is first edition Twilight 2000. Because in first edition Twilight 2000, what you have is Russia is fighting a big war in China, and they request help from their Warsaw Pact allies, and an East German unit mutinies. You get the situation where East Germany now tries to reunify with West Germany. West Germany pushes over the border, and it drags everybody else in. Now, that's a fascinating scenario. It's worth noting that it does lead to some fascinating little random bits with that, in that the Dutch refuse to actually cross the inner German border, but will fight defensively. The Italians actually ally with the Soviets. So it does become a quite interesting scenario, and I think that would be a very easy rule with this, to actually have how willing are the Western allies to actually come in to a West German move into East Germany, because Article 5 hasn't been triggered. interesting little thing you could add to it. So that's the map itself. Let's have a quick look at the counters. It's a single counter set of sheets, quite a few revolt markers, because every time a city goes into revolt you put that on it. Now you can see they're all single-sided, so there's no step reduction or anything in this. It is the rather simple combat results chart, where you just basically compare it to strength, and it's all on ratios, and the results are attacker eliminated, attacker retreats, defender retreats, defender eliminated, or an exchange where the defender is wiped out and the attacker loses the same number of units. So what you have, and I do like the touch that these are actually telling you which units they are. So you do have, for example, I'll pick up the British BAOR, then you've got British 2 and British 1, so they are the armoured divisions being added to it. The Berlin Brigade is in there. That's got a special rule in that it can't actually attack, it can only defend. So you have those are the NATO forces. You've also got 5 air units, we'll look at them in a minute. The Soviets have got a considerable number, and they have some special units. They have a couple of air mobile units, or airborne, and this is actually a really nice rule. If you think of the standard Russian approach whenever trying to take over a country, one of the key things to do was to use airborne forces and special forces to land, seize the capital, deal with it quickly, bring the troops in. It was certainly used in the Ukraine. You can go back to its use in Afghanistan in 1979 and so on. So it fits the background perfectly. You've then got all your neutral countries, well, the Warsaw Pact countries and the neutrals. You've got the Poles, you've got the Czechs, East German, the Hungarians, you've got the Romanians, the Bulgarians, you've got Austria, Albania, and then the interesting bit is you've got Yugoslavia in 2 colours. Now the reason for that is the Yugoslav scenario features a civil war. So you actually have troops fighting on both sides. Now when I look at the unit strengths, I'm a little bemused. The East German army, we've got a 3, a 3 and a 1. Now let's go back and look at that list that we said we had of the different forces. Here we go. So bearing in mind this is the days when you're doing the best you can with this, we've got variations. You've got it's a bit unclear. It's got 2 armoured and 4 mortar rifle. So okay, I'm not quite sure how these have translated across. Looking at it, Hungary, okay, 1 armour, 5. Okay, so it seems to be about two divisions per counter, which means that when we come to Yugoslavia, let's see what Yugoslavia is listed as. Okay, they seem to have quite a few units. They've actually got 7 divisions, 15 brigades. Okay, so perhaps it isn't as far out as I thought. Albania though, 1 armoured, 6 infantry brigades, 1 counter, value 1. Okay, yeah. I suppose there has to be a bit of a quantitative judgment in there as well. Austria may be slightly short-changed, I think, with 1 unit strength 3. It's something you can debate. I would love to see how these were figured out. I mean, the Dutch army has got a value of 3. Let's have a look at that one. So when we look at Holland, where are we? France, Belgium, Netherlands, here we go. So we've got 5 divisions, 5 reserve divisions and 3 reserve brigades. Okay, probably there's a lot of statistical analysis. This I believe the game is James Dunnigan is the author. James F. Dunnigan, yeah, who is notorious for very detailed looking at Orbats and evaluation. I don't always agree with his thoughts. He may have been slightly optimistic, I think, with some things, pessimistic with others, but it does give us a good idea. It's also worth noting we've got the air units. So we've got 4 Soviet, 5 NATO. Quantitative wise, that seems out, but qualitative, probably balancing in. I think I can see the logic for that. Air units will basically give a shift in combat rather than anything else. So let's have a quick glance through the rules. Talks through the setup, how the units can be read. We've got definitions of things, what the different countries are. So that's just looking at the counters. There's nothing sort of exceptional in this. Had the odd moment I found here, which was each hexagon is approximately 56 kilometers from side to side. 56. Very odd figure, but I'm guessing that was so that it fitted on the single map sheet. So the sequence of play is the Warsaw Pact stroke NATO player. Warsaw Pact is basically separate to the Soviet for the purpose of this. They roll to see if there's a revolt. We then get the replacement reinforcement phase, so any units that have been designated as replacements appear. And you also rebuild damaged units. Now NATO rebuild them quicker than the Warsaw Pact. Well, than NATO, sorry. So then I'll start that again, than the Soviets. We then get the movement phase, and it's very simple. All infantry units have got a movement value of 8. Straightforward. The 2 air units can do a move of 14 and can then move 1 square, but they have to start and end in clear ones, and they also have to spend a turn stacked with an air unit before they can do that again. Air units have got a move of 14 for Russian, 20 for NATO. And an oddity with them is they don't need to return to base. It's almost as if this is where they can work. Bit of an odd mechanism. I'll be interested to see how it plays. So ground units move nice and straightforward, hex to hex. There's nothing unusual there. Air movement is just straight movement. You've got as well rail movement. So when Soviet units are in the Soviet Union, they move at a 3rd speed. When they go into an uncontrolled Warsaw Pact country, it's half speed. NATO ground units, a 3rd in NATO countries. And once you're going into a country that has gone into revolt, even if it's put down, then it becomes normal movement. There are some modifiers for crossing rivers, rough terrain and so on. So stacking is nice and straightforward. 2 ground units in a hex, as easy as that. There are zones of control, and when you move into a zone of control you have to stop. An interesting oddity is you can't move out of a zone of control without the combat result. So once 2 units move next to each other, they are locked until that combat has finished. So the combat, if you've played a game of this era, it's very simple. You total up the strength points, work it as a ratio and roll a 6-sided dice. Each air unit that you have attacking with adds 1. Now air units can attack each other as well, so you can try and win air control. They just all have a combat value of 1, and it's again using that odds there. It's all the extra bits about attacking from multiple hexes at once and all of that. How you retreat, if you can advance after combat, the zone of control bit, the reinforcement rules, supply, which is very simple. Can you trace a route free of enemy zone of control back to your base edge? The Warsaw Pact and neutral countries are basically always in supply in their home countries, and they never leave their home countries. So that's pretty straightforward. And it's then got the rules for how they can actually join the war. So if people start invading, then they will join the opposite side and so on. Suppressing revolts, basically if you move into the city, or if you fight your way into the city, cities have an intrinsic combat value of 1 when they're in revolt, and they're beaten, then the revolt counter is removed. and obviously that helps the Russian player considerably, because now it's a lot safer for them. They're not going to get as high a result on the table. And you've got the 4 different scenarios, the order of battle for each. Gives you some nice historical notes about what happened in the real life scenarios. Very short players notes, and it talks about the Soviets. Basically, you have to, as soon as you see a revolt, you have to pile in and hammer it as quickly as you can. NATO is very much a waiting game. You can't do anything until NATO's triggered, really. But what you can do is keep the revolts going. Play that revolting country. Keep the revolt alive until NATO joins you. And that's basically it. Now, it's a fascinating game, because it's looking at something that we don't normally consider. It's looking at NATO going east. You could even play, I suppose you could create a historical scenario very easily where Poland starts to rise up. What happened with Solidarity? Did the Russians consider going in? You then have. It's actually quite a good way to look at it. You had Poland going, then you started getting the poorer bits to the south where people were crossing into NATO. East Germany then started to go into revolt, and Gorbachev made the decision not to intervene. I'd have liked that to be in there. I don't think that was something that was even considered when they were putting this together. It wasn't something across anybody's mind, if we're honest about it. Let's be fair. That was something which just, when it happened, we all went, oh. We just didn't expect it. It's also worth saying there were other revolts. There was the East German revolt. That's often forgotten about. So there is a lot of historical precedent for this. If there's enough interest in this, let me know in the comments, and what I will do is I'll actually do a full playthrough of the game and we'll see just how well it goes. But on a quick read through, it's a very simple game. It's designed around the standard SPI games of the era, which I'm familiar with, so it's actually quite a simple game, I think, to learn. Hope that was useful. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please click on the like button below so that I know what people like and I know what to make more of. Alternatively, if you've enjoyed it and think you'd like to see more, please click on the subscribe button. That way you get notified by YouTube whenever I bring out a new video. And you never know, there might be something in there that you hadn't considered, because I do cover a variety of things on the channel. And finally, if you have a little bit of cash going, I now have a Patreon account. I'm always looking for patrons, because at the end of the day, let's be perfectly honest, it's a good way for me to get a little bit of money that will use to buy review items or to travel to museums and so on. I don't put a huge amount on that. At the minute, all we've got is one tier charging £1 a month, which just, as I said, helps cover my costs. See you soon.